You're listening to Yoked, Conversations with Real-Life Yogis. I'm Kelly Sunrose, your host. The mission of this podcast is to share the teachings of yoga as applied to everyday life by real people through interviews, conversations, Q&A sessions, and more. Learn more at yokedpodcast.com. Hi everybody, it's Kelly. I'm so excited to share this episode with you. Today I'm in conversation with dear, sweet Bhakti Foster-Purvine. Bhakti teaches integral yoga and has an Ayurveda practice at her studio, Shanti Om, here in Portland, Oregon. I've had the privilege of knowing Bhakti for years, and she is such an incredible model for living the practice as a woman, as a mother, as a human being truly concerned with the wellness and wholeness of us all. A little more about Bhakti. After her first integral yoga class in the mid-90s, she knew right away that she was hooked on yoga. Since then, her love and passion for yoga has continued to deepen and mature. Bhakti is a graduate in integral yoga through the Satchitananda Ashram. She has studied with a medley of teachers and gives sincere thanks to each of them. She has spent time in India practicing, teaching, and learning yoga traditions. And Bhakti has led yoga retreats to India, Guatemala, and Costa Rica. Bhakti is a certified Ayurveda wellness counselor at the 500-hour level. Bhakti leads retreats to India, which include practice, sightseeing, temple visits, and volunteering at the organization Families for Children, which she has supported for many years through service visits and by selling beautiful yoga mats created by a women's organization in India. Learn more about her upcoming retreat and Bhakti's work with Families for Children by following the link in the show notes. And I've also included a video about Families for Children on yokedpodcast.com. Thank you so much, Bhakti, for joining us on the show and for sharing your practice with the world. So in other news, my dear friends, I have a couple of new practices up in the Sunrose Yoga Shop. One is called Spectrum, which is a subtle body exploration. And this includes a combination of 8 videos and 8 audio meditations, plus a workbook about the subtle body, including the chakras. Check it out if you're interested in learning more about the subtle body. And I also have a new meditation collection up called Cosmic Spiral. And this is a collection of 3 meditations plus a sound bath. I'm really excited about both of those things. So if you want to practice with me there, let's do it. Also, we have such a great crew practicing together in the WILDCAT Yoga Club. I thought I would mention that it's really great, and we get to connect with each other 3 times a month through online monthly work groups where we sit together in meditation, we practice active listening, and we empower ourselves through the voice. And there's so much more happening over there. Learn more at wildcatyogaclub.com. Every month, I donate 15% of my income to organizations and funds that aligned with my personal mission and the mission of the podcast and my teaching. In April, we donated to Mercy USA to provide aid to Syrians, and 350.org, which is a climate activist organization. And additionally, thanks to the generosity of North Portland Yoga here in town, we made an extra donation to the Black and Missing Foundation. In May, I'll be donating 15% of my income to Oceana and Families for Children. To see all of the organizations we've supported, check out our mission statement, which you can access through the show notes. If you have an organization you'd like to recommend to receive some support and visibility, please connect via the contact page over at yokedpodcast.com. Thank you so much for making these donations possible. We can do good together through our practice. Now, looking ahead, last week I mentioned that registration for my 150-hour advanced teacher training will open in June, and that is for the year of March 2018 to June 2019. A little bit sooner than that, our next immersion will take place in November and will focus on our pranayama practice and taking that deeper. So if you're interested in deepening your connection to the breath and to the subtle body through the breath, stay tuned. Thanks so much for being here. Thanks again to our guest, Bhakti. Love to all. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Oh, I just love seeing your face. Oh. What brought you to yoga in the beginning?
Okay. Actually, meditation. I was really interested in meditation, and but I was having a little bit of trouble sitting still. And so I had tried a yoga class at the YMCA. This is probably 20 something years ago. And I remember thinking, wow, that's not what I thought yoga was, you know. And so I kind of walked away from it for a while. I think that was a 4-week series or maybe a 6-week series. And so I think a couple of years later, again, I was really interested in meditation, and a friend of mine suggested going to this ashram that was like an hour and a half from my house, and it was called Yogaville. And so I looked it up, and I signed up for a weekend workshop called Self-Exploration through Hatha Yoga.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you just went like right into the deep end of the pool.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so I drove, it was about an hour and a half from my house to Buckingham, Virginia, and where this huge ashram was. And that's where I met my teacher, Swami Satchidananda. And I met him that weekend. And I sort of did the guru eye lock thing, and you know, I remember the first time I met him, and I went back to my dorm room, and I remember thinking, wow, like something's changed, and I didn't really know what, but I knew it was like really big. And so I went home that weekend, and I took a little sheet of these. It had like a set of sun salutations and a back bending, little back bending sequence and forward folds. And it was probably about a 30, 45-minute sequence, and I did it every day for a year, just at home, because there was not any yoga studios in my town. And my life changed, like, really in big ways, like mentally and physically and spiritually. And it was a very simple practice.
I love that.
Yeah. And my kids were they were just babies at that time. And I remember I had a yoga mat right beside my bed, and I would literally roll off my bed, light one candle, because I knew if I walked out of that room that the kids would be up. And so I just, I was very disciplined, just to have that time. And it made major changes, and I was hooked. So.
Oh, I love it. I know that feeling too, where it's like the quiet time before anyone else is awake,
right,
is full of magic.
yes.
And even now, like for me, I get up early to sit, because if I do a movement practice, even if it's at 5 o'clock in the morning,
Right.
someone will wake up. And even if they're awake and not coming down, the house has a different energy.
Right.
So I
Yeah.
love thinking about you just rolling out of bed,
And
rolling out of your mat.
even the animals sometimes. it's
Yes. Oh, yes.
So, yeah, I would literally roll off right onto my mat and just be there before any other practice.
Yeah.
And it was huge.
Do you remember, so you said that you went to your first yoga class at the YMCA or wherever, and you were sort of like, oh, that's what yoga is. What did you think yoga was before
Well,
that?
I had this idea that it was something spiritual and deep.
Yeah.
They didn't offer it in my town, in the small town that I lived in, which is where I ended up opening the first Shanti Om yoga, which was kind of a huge thing for some people, some positive and some not. And there was some aversion to it. But yeah, I remember going to that class, and it was like a big glass wall, and people were walking by, and it was a very physical class, and I wasn't able to do it all, and so it wasn't what I had thought. My idea of yoga, was completely different.
It's interesting. I have a similar early situation where I had been exposed to the practice from a very early age, because my aunt and uncle were devotees of Gangaji and were students of Judith Lassiter's, probably 40 years ago. And so I had watched a lot of videos of this guru with a white turban on talking about, yoga as a vehicle for transformation and for love and all of these things. And it's true, like the first time I went to a yoga class, I was like, okay, I don't quite have this all figured out,
Right.
which is like obviously great, but also I think they're, especially back then, outside of the ashram or New York City or San Francisco, it was like really hard to find a yoga class.
Yes.
Yeah, it's interesting thinking back on that. Oh, okay, so you began this practice. You, unlike many people, maybe really had a dedicated home practice before anything else.
Yeah.
When did you make the transition from practitioner to practitioner and teacher?
I think I had been practicing for about a year and a half, like not that long.
Yeah.
And I decided that I wanted to go deeper. And actually, initially I started just to take a teacher training to deepen my own practices, because that's what I was told, and that was the right reasons to go into it. And so I decided to take the teacher training at Yogaville in Integral Yoga, which I'm still, like, to this day, I'm so grateful that I have that as my foundation. And just being in the presence of Swami Satchidananda, which to me is like the definition of like what yoga is. And I, in the teacher training, I think we studied for probably about a week, maybe 10 days before we even talked about asana. Yeah. Like we were really more into the philosophy, and chanting and stuff like that before we were even introduced to, the asana and the anatomy of it all. So I'm really happy that I have that, even though I've done a lot of other styles and teacher trainings. That's my foundation,
Was that a residential program, or did you commute?
It was residential, yeah. It's a month-long program. So,
wow.
Yeah. So.
And what, did your family come with you?
No.
Or did they?
No, I had a very good friend who I call her Shakti Mama.
Yes,
to
we've
this
heard
day,
of Shakti Mama.
because she came and took care of my kids while I was away. And they came up like on weekends and stuff. Mm-hmm. But the idea of that program through Integral Yoga was to really immerse yourself into it and, not have the distractions. So.
Oh, yeah. Oh. It's so interesting. The headspace of the first yoga teacher training.
Yeah.
That you do is such an interesting place. And I mean, I remember being in it and thinking sometimes I think I might be going crazy. And now, working with a lot of teacher trainees and new teachers, just witnessing that and everything all of the peeling away that happens when you really start to engage in self-study.
Yeah.
Oh, it's big.
It's quite amazing.
Yeah. So you completed your teacher training at Yogaville, and where did you start teaching right away?
I was actually, I had been studying karate for quite some time, martial arts.
Wow.
And so I started by teaching the black belts. I did it. It was I had a tin can. This is no joke. And it was just this donation class.
Yeah.
And so I would teach my class before we would, do our karate practice. So,
I love it.
yeah. And still at that point, there were no yoga studios. I was living in a small town called Stanton in Virginia. And I finally started to teach. I was teaching about 20 miles away from my house in Harrisonburg, and then outside, just a few studios outside of Stanton, I was driving to teach. And I kept asking for an altar, and no one would let me bring in an altar, not even a candle.
Yeah.
So I was a little bummed about that.
Oh, yeah.
And then that's when I went to India and met my teacher, Swami Divyananda, and said, I'd really like to have a yoga space to where I could have an altar. And she said, oh, yes, you can do that. And I came back from it. First time I came back from India, things started happening really quick to open up the first Shanti Om yoga. Mm-hmm. And I have an altar full of...
Yes. Oh. It's the transition from practicing, I think, or being a student in an ashram setting to then, going to the community center or even, studios period, there's a shift.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I can't remember if we've ever talked about this before, but I did my teacher training not at an ashram, but the school where I studied has 3 ashrams, and we would go there for weekend intensives. Right. And at the time I was living in Colorado, and it was more normal there to have altars and to chant, and that was a part of the culture. Yeah. But when I moved to Seattle, a few years later, it was still very much, it was fringe to even chant one Om.
Right.
Yeah, that can be tricky as a teacher. How, what was it like when you opened your first space and you had an altar, and that might have been a little different for people in the area? What was it like for you as a teacher?
Well, it was interesting because I opened the space. I also had a pretty large retail space where I was doing some importing and nonprofit. So we were importing from different countries, and India was one big one. So the retail part had a lot of statues and incense and stuff like that, and then the upstairs was yoga. So I think, it was tricky, and the people in that community who loved it really loved it, and was so appreciative that they had a space like that to come to and to experience, I think sort of the true spirit of yoga, with the chanting and, the whole thing, the whole integral experience. Actually, I think it was probably a little while after I opened the studio, and, I could still feel myself sort of tiptoeing around, not to offend anyone. I think my biggest fear was like someone was going to get up and walk out of one of my classes because I said Krishna or something. And I actually went to do an advanced teacher training with Eric Schiffman, and he is the one that opened me up to being true to my practice and to my teaching. And I came back, California was a huge, training there, and being, in Venice Beach, and the yoga there. And it was like nothing I'd ever seen before, but it was refreshing. And Eric was, he was the one that sort of opened me up to just teaching what I practiced, and not to hold back, and those who wanted it would come, and those who didn't wouldn't, and just to accept that. And so there was a huge shift in my teaching, and even my students, when I came back from that training, were like, wow, Bhakti, something's changed here, and they, they liked it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Oh, there is something magical about Eric. Is there just like that, not only permission to be you and to share your teaching, but almost like a mandate, but you have to, you can only teach Bhakti's practice.
Right.
Of course.
Yeah. Yeah, he made a huge difference. And, just talking about the ashram and sort of studio yoga, Eric agreed to come to Yogaville, I guess it was maybe 8 or 9 years ago. And that was quite a combination, Schiffman and Satchidananda, because what you saw was these people that lived this ashram style and was a little bit nervous about any outside things coming in. And then, Eric coming in and bringing these yogis that had never had the ashram experience. It was such a beautiful thing to see that combination, and the swamis there kind of relaxing a little into his, his teaching. And of course they fell madly in love with him, and he's been going back every other year since. But yeah, so...
It can be hard. I think it does require bravery to teach your practice. And it's interesting how it's shifted over the years that you and I have been teaching. Back then, it's yoga was not as available as it is now.
Right.
And that brought with it certain challenges, just sort of an education about this is what this is, here's what we're up to, these are the methods.
Right.
Here are the texts, or at least the body of wisdom that we're coming from. And now it's like yoga is very much available in a certain way.
Right.
But there's still, I think, a lot of the work that I do is very similar to what it was back then, because what's available doesn't necessarily it's not necessarily a reflection of the old wisdom or the tradition of practice.
Right.
And so it's like things have changed, but things have also very much stayed the same in a sense.
Yeah. I think it's getting, I don't get out a whole lot, but it seems like yoga I feel like it's slowing down a lot. I think, I think a lot of people are recognizing that we don't need to go so fast in our practice, even if, just in traveling and stuff and taking different classes, I've noticed, even like a vinyasa classes, it seems like they're not quite as fast as they used to be. And for me, that works better because I don't need to go fast in my practice.
Yes. So. Yeah. What's your practice like right now?
It's pretty gentle, I think. I like to challenge myself a few times a week in my practice, and I love a flow, but I appreciate more of a gentle flow. And it kind of depends on where I'm at, energetically on that given day. If I need something that's a little more, volume to it, or just more of a gentle restorative practice. But yeah, I don't feel the need to go hard at my yoga practice anymore. It's almost made like a full circle, like that practice I was telling you about, at 30 to 45 minute practice in the morning. That was, it's extremely gentle. Three sets of sun salutations, and the back bends, the forward folds, definitely an inversion, but very slow and meditative and gentle. And then there were a few years where I really sort of kicked it up. And now I feel like I'm just coming back to that really simple, familiar poses that, that I can just stay with and be comfortable and breathe in and fill up and fill out, and just have more passion about what I'm doing, and not so much trying different things as much as I used to like to do.
I do. That leads me into just sort of wanting to talk about your Ayurveda practice, because I imagine that has a big impact on what you're working on in as far as asana and meditation goes. How were you introduced to Ayurveda?
I've been interested in Ayurveda most of my yoga life, so I would say probably for about at least the past 15 years, I've sort of dabbled deeply into it. I do a lot of weekend workshops, and anytime I go to India, I always make that a part of my travels. I visit hospitals and talk to doctors and do a lot of the practices, take a lot of treatments just to learn more. And then I saw David Ray. I studied with him. I did a Thai yoga massage thing with him several years back, and that had a big Ayurveda aspect to it. And then when I moved out to Portland, I decided to go deeper, and I attended the Kerala Ayurveda Institute for a year, and I did a 500-hour program there. And yeah, I love Ayurveda, and I incorporate it in a lot of my yoga classes. Most of my yoga classes will have some Ayurveda to it. Mm-hmm. We'll focus on a specific dosha or digestion, or something that has to do with Ayurveda practices.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it's like it has been such a game changer. Mm-hmm. And when I became a teacher 11 years ago, I started studying Ayurveda. But it really wasn't until after my daughter she must have been 2 or something, mm-hmm. and I was so depleted.
Right.
And all of my guides, Chinese medicine and Ayurvedic were like, the answer here is bone broth, my darling. And
right.
some other just extremely, ghee.
Yeah.
You need to drink ghee.
Yeah.
That tells of it. And I had been so resistant, because around that time, the 90s and the early 2000s, especially in yoga world, were just dominated by green juice and
right.
raw vegan.
Exactly.
And, for lots of humans, myself included, in this climate, that is just not the medicine.
Right, right.
And the daily practice just, has been a game changer for me.
Yeah.
Who knew? I mean, I guess, I was going to say who knew, but I guess lots of people knew that scraping your tongue and
right.
swishing oil and rubbing your body in oil, it has a real effect.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's changed my life too. I think the diet has been huge. And yeah, just the self-care,
right.
the oiling,
mm-hmm.
especially, my vata usually runs pretty high. And it's interesting right now because I'm actually going through this perimenopause. Mm-hmm. So it's tricky with Ayurveda because I run cold and then I'll run really hot. So it's been an interesting practice to change things within the hour, going from heat to needing to do cooling breath or something,
Yeah.
So that's been my newest thing with Ayurveda.
Yeah. Oh, I bet that's such a interesting lab for experimentation.
Right. It is, and it works. You just do the opposite.
Yes.
So.
What are your most potent daily practices? What do you think has made the biggest?
I think the self-care part that I have just incorporated into my daily routine, mm-hmm. And it just makes a huge difference. I try to I'm more mindful about all of my activities. Whether it's brushing my teeth and just really recognizing what's going on, and to cooking a meal, to taking what I call my spiritual bath every day. And I've just just learned to allow myself not that much time to where it feels like it's taking away from anything, but enough time to do what I need to do with those practices, like you said, oil pull and nasya and pranayama is a huge part of my practice.
Mm-hmm.
And I I kind of have learned to incorporate that in about a 25, maybe 30-minute period in my day, you know.
It's the thing that amazes me is it really doesn't take much.
Right.
You just have to do it.
Yeah.
And there's, you know, for so many years we can be in a headspace where it's like, oh, well, I don't have all day
right.
to devote to my stuff, so I'm not going to do anything.
Yeah.
When, like, doing one thing
right.
every single day is huge.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that's part of the beauty about Ayurveda is it's so user-friendly, and it really meets you where you're at. Like, there's always some little things that you can do, and when I do consultations, you know, if someone comes to me and they're eating a lot of hamburgers, or, you know, it's like, well, don't just stop that right away, but we, you know, you meet them where they're at, and that's how, you know, for years I was a single mother with 2 teenage boys who loved pizza, and, you know, offering them some of these practices that wouldn't completely turn them off, but also enough to where they would recognize what fast food does, you know.
Right.
And when they would eat something that didn't agree, they recognized that was, you know, it was not good for their body or for their, you know, for their dosha or whatever it was. So, you know, there's been times in my life when I've been able to apply it more, and then sometimes, you know, it's been less. But there's always something, you know, that's been helpful, you know.
Well, and for your kids too, just that developing awareness around what you put on and in your body, wherever it is, like, you know, what you're looking at, what you're eating, what you're listening to, is so wonderful. I mean, because I think it is, a lot of people are still, even now, haven't really fully understood the connection between, you know, like what we're eating and how we feel.
Yeah.
And that's not to say, I mean, and I'm not saying that in any sort of judgmental way, because I mean, sometimes for me, like, a cheeseburger is the medicine.
Right.
Like, a coffee is the most delicious, healthful thing I can do for myself. Right. So it's not like any sort of like hierarchy around it, but just
Absolutely. Well, and that's another thing with Ayurveda. You know, Ayurveda, I've never heard Ayurveda say no to anything. All my teachers, the doctors, you know, that I've talked to and learned from, you know, never heard like, don't do that. And that's, for me, that's helpful, because if you tell me not to do something, I don't want to do it, you know. But it's more like, maybe try this, or maybe cut that out just a little, you know, maybe, you know, replace it with this once a week or something. And that's when, you know, if I do have clients that are eating, you know, cheeseburgers 4 or 5 days a week, which I did have a client like that, it's like, okay, well, how can we, you know, just start to replace the cheeseburger with, you know, something a little better, like a couple of days a week, or so. And it is hard to recognize that the food that we eat are making so much trouble for us mentally, physically, and spiritually, you know. But it, you know, for me, I just getting on a groove of eating things that are good for my vata and pitta is, you start to recognize it sooner. I think my husband and I probably eat Indian food probably 5, maybe 6 days a week. And, you know, there's that day, it's like, let's go out for Mexican. And we have the best time, but I'll feel it, you know, the cheese and, you know, different things. So it's just, you know, I think the more you practice, the more you start to recognize, you know, what's...
Yeah. There's a refinement. Tell me about this spiritual bath that you take.
Well, most of the time it's in the morning. And, you know, Ayurveda says we should wake early. That's the sort of the Shanti time, the time of peace. And so, you know, I usually wake up around anywhere from 5 to 6. And I've gotten a habit of just watching my breath and finding gratitude. You know, Ayurveda says it's really important to do that. And then I'll usually, after I get up and have a little water with lemon or drink, if I try to have water before coffee. I do have coffee in the morning, but I try to be mindful about that. And then I usually go to the bathroom, and it's also important if we're on the daily thing, is just to splash your face with cold water, rinse your mouth, whether you brush your teeth or not, but rinse your mouth and your eyes. And then often after that, I'll go ahead and do my yoga practice before I take my bath, because sometimes if I take my spiritual bath, actually it gets energy moving a little too much, so I try not to go too fast. My husband will usually shower first before, if we practice together. But then I'll do my yoga practice, and then getting ready to move on with my day, I will do an Abhyanga, which is just using sesame oil, really oiling myself up, and then I run warm to hot bath, and then I do the oil pulling actually while I'm soaking in the tub, and sometimes I'll put on a little music or light incense, and then I'll soak in the tub with the oil in my body, doing the oil pulling, doing a little nasya with the oil, and just really watching my breath, and I have a few little affirmations around my bathtub, and I just make it and it really is usually 20 minutes. It's not that long. And then I get out and put clean clothes on, and so I call it my spiritual bath, because it's a spiritual time for me, and I'm sort of contemplating the day, and I really enjoy it. I love my baths.
Oh, baths are magic.
Yeah, they really are. They really are. You can do all kinds of things in that. I do a lot of some of my best thoughts come when I'm soaking in the tub.
Yeah, for me, it's such a grounding place. I think when I was in law school, I took a bath every single night.
Yeah.
Because it's such a...
Yeah. It's good medicine.
Yeah.
And it's relatively cheap,
Yeah.
For me, it works better than a glass of wine. That's just... And sometimes I do take a bath at night. I've been known to take 2 baths, but mostly just one.
Oh, I did this fall. I was doing this thing called the power bath, where because one thing that happens to me is I'll just get a chill, or it's one of those days where it's just been so much, and when you're a parent, it's like the faucet never turns off, but I don't. Once the day gets going, generally have a ton of time for necessarily a bath at 3 p.m. or whatever.
Right.
But in the fall, I started doing this practice where I would take a bath that was limited to 10 minutes because that's what was available.
Right.
And it just shifted the quality of the evening, just sort of like a pre-witching hour bath. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and it's nice to have, you're talking about the witching, just to have like all your oil, just to have all your things there that make you feel comfortable and relaxed. And, I have all kinds of potions on my little tray on my bathtub.
Okay, so you did the Ayurveda training, and now you have a practice where people come to you for advice with their daily rituals and their whatever they're working with digestion wise or whatever. And so you also have a studio in town. So you've moved across the country. You're in Portland practicing Ayurveda, and you have a studio. What's it like to have a yoga studio in Portland, Oregon?
Well, it's great. I mean, it's what I do. I love shopkeeping. Shanti it's sort of on, St. John's is on the outskirts, so I feel like it's kind of outside of Portland in a way. And it's community. It's people. A lot of people who come to classes walk to class, bike to class. So yeah, it's like my community and like a family, really. Having it, and now we just opened an annex, which is where the Ayurveda practices or the consultations and Abhyanga and Shirodhara is that we're offering, and that is above proper eats. So, and it's just a room where we offer massage and Ayurveda services. So, I love being a part of the yoga studio and helping people to get to know yoga, and I feel really blessed for that. And I contribute it to my teacher, Swami Satchidananda. I think he's really guided so much of it.
What different skills does it require of you to own a studio? So there's sort of the yoga of being a yoga teacher,
right? And
then there's the yoga of owning a studio. How do you sort of shift there? What different things are required of you?
Well, I don't think that I shift really. Ayurveda and yoga tells us, that we work from our heart. And I just, I've always had just this faith that things will work as they should. And, a lot of my teachers have taught me that through relaxation that things come. And, if we push things, that it can happen too. But it's typically, it doesn't go the way that we want it to often. Maybe it does, but so I try to be a part of the studio. I teach 4 or 5 classes a week, and I attend classes. I think I know pretty much all the students, whether they're my students or not. I work study some of the classes. So, I just, I make it a point to be present. And not to say that it's not challenging, and there's a lot of things that have to be done on the computer and, with mind, body and that sort of thing. And there's a designated time that I do that, and I try, to monitor that side too, not to do too much, but it's great. I mean, I feel like it's my path, it's my dharma, it's my work, and and I have a lot of love and passion for it, and so I think I think there's a lot of divine guidance. It's not me. I mean, it's really, I feel like there's something bigger that's guiding me to make the decisions I make and to keep things going, and and I ask for help from my teachers, which I think is important, and I keep studying.
Yes. There's that leaning into the practices.
Yeah.
And being able to touch in with your teachers. Yeah. It changes. There's a change in the quality of the I want to say vibration, but I also I want to be more clear than that. But just the quality of the contact has a different.
Yeah, right. I think I do think it's important. I've been studying with Todd Jackson most recently, and
I study with Todd,
and he's so great. And that I feel like he's really the first teacher in Portland that I've found like he's my teacher right now, and I'm learning so much. It is important, I think, that when you're a teacher that you have someone, and not to say, I mean, my students are probably my biggest teachers and have actually taught me how to teach.
Right.
Or they wouldn't keep coming back if I wasn't learning from them how to teach. Them class, but yeah, it's I would, and moving out to Portland every couple of years, I have to go to India. I have to make connection. I have to do something to feed my spirit, or I have to go see Saul or Eric or Yogaville or something like that, and I make it a point to do that, to sort of replenish myself, and and to keep learning, and to keep things more, to keep things fresh. I think it's really important. But yeah, it's been really nice to study with Todd and have someone local that I can go to every week. Yes. My husband and I both have been studying with him. So.
Oh, good. Oh,
yeah.
It's nice. I mean, we're in a similar boat where I think before this, there was a plane ticket involved with
exactly
going to practice with your teacher.
Yeah. Right.
And that's great.
Yeah.
But it is nice also to be able to go across town.
Yeah.
And check in with someone around.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm learning so much. And as I get older and my body changes, there's things that's coming up that it's like, whoa, where did that come from? And he's been so helpful with, I've got this recent shoulder injury, and he's just really opened things up with that too. And just giving me more tools to use, and so that's been really good.
Yes. Oh, it's nice. I mean, it's another thing I really enjoy about just having teachers is, and not necessarily people who I agree with on every single point, but just like having that feedback, and like someone else who's had more year, or someone who's had more experience, just bouncing ideas off of them or trying things out, and I think it's really important.
Yeah. It is. I'm so grateful for all these teachers and saints and sages that we have. That's keeps these practices going. And,
So this is my final question. Why do you practice yoga today?
Why do I practice yoga? I practice yoga to keep myself physically, mentally, and spiritually fit. And, it's not just one of those things. It can't be. It's all of those things combined that, I've just found that it's worked over these, it's worked over all these years. When I don't practice, I definitely know it. And I think it's just a great approach to life. And I will just say, I do feel like, a lot of people who are only practicing yoga and not getting into the Ayurveda side are really missing like half the picture, and vice versa. When I go to India, I meet Indians that they do a lot of Ayurveda, but they don't really practice the yoga side. And I think it's important to have both of those aspects. And here in the West, I think Ayurveda is relatively new compared to like Chinese medicine. And I think that's only because, I think the Chinese came over here first, is probably the only reason, because it's as old. But anything that old is, I trust it. So yoga and Ayurveda is, it's something that, thousands and thousands of years old. And so, it gives me peace.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome, Kelly. Thank you so much for having me. I'm honored and humbled and grateful.
What a treat.
Very happy.
Thanks so much for listening to today's podcast. Complete show notes are available at yokedpodcast.com. Please feel free to connect by emailing me at sunroseyoga@gmail.com. Today's episode is made possible by the WILDCAT Yoga Club, our online yoga community. The clubhouse contains an ever-expanding library of audio and video practices, plus lectures, tutorials, and video Q&A sessions, plus monthly online workshops in meditation, active listening, and embodied voice. Membership also includes discounts on all courses, retreats, and products in the Sunrose Yoga Shop. All of this for $15 a month or $150 per year. Connect with the yoga of real life by visiting www.wildcatyogaclub.com. Thanks.